Hello, everybody, and welcome to the bi-weekly SIG Cluster Lifecycle meeting. I am your moderator facilitator for today. My name is Justin Santa Barbara. I work at Google. Today is Tuesday, the 4th of May, 2021. May the 4th be with you. We have a fairly light agenda for the day. I have pasted a link into the chat. Please do feel free to add any agenda items. We normally like to start with any new meeting participants being invited to introduce themselves. I don't know if there are any new meeting participants that would like to do so. If there are, please feel free to unmute and introduce yourself if you would like to.
Hi, I'm David Watson. I used to participate in SIG Cluster Lifecycle, but it's been a little while. So, hello.
Hey, David. I'm Alex. This is my first SIG Cluster Lifecycle meeting. I think I've seen a few faces like Justin before over in various conferences, but I thought I'd just come see what you guys are doing and maybe be interested as an end user of Cluster API. And I work at Skyscanner.
Hey, Alex.
Wonderful. Well, welcome back, David. Welcome, Alex. Good to see you again. I'm sure I certainly remember you from some conferences. Can't remember which. If there's anyone else, last call. Otherwise, we have a chat introduction from Victor, whose mic is not connected. Victor is SIG release docs lead for 122 and says, nice to meet you all. So welcome, Victor, as well. All right. Moving on to the next section of our agenda, that is group topics or PSAs. Fabrizio, I know you said you had something you wanted to talk about. We don't actually have any group topics on the agenda. Do you want to talk about that topic here or later on after the subproject updates?
I move it up. Sorry. Okay. So my topic is a more question for the audience. So Cluster Lifecycle is getting big. We have a lot of sub-projects. And at least one time for a year, we are required from the steering committee, basically to prepare a report, which contain a lot of interesting stuff about the health of the SIG. For instance, how we do triage, how we do, how we keep our owner list up to date, stuff like that. The report was interesting, and this year I helped a little bit Lubomir to prepare the repo, and basically we did this report top down. So starting from the SIG chair, SIG tech lead, and we prepared the repo, collecting information from the different projects. I'm starting to wondering if this is the right approach, or we should, let me say, move to a more federated approach where we ask each project to be proactive and to show they are healthy in terms of managing their own community, because at the end this was the goal of the steering quest. This will kind of help us because we are going to ask the project to report in this meeting periodically, not only about the technical activity, but also about the health of the community, which makes a lot of sense for me. So this was one idea that popped up to my mind. Let's try to make this happen. So we as a SIG governance, we gain more visibility, but also as a SIG project, we start discussing about processes like triage, like whatever is like how do we allow new people to step in as maintainer, stuff like that, and this makes the entire SIG more welcome for new people. So opinions, thoughts about this idea?
I certainly think it sounds like an excellent idea. I know that as you say, like the intent of the steering committee is not necessarily to hear the answers, but to make us answer the questions. And so we are a looser federation than like some of the other SIGs that are like much more the same group of people that work on all the projects. And so therefore we'll naturally have the same processes. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to do what you propose and encourage the sub-projects to effectively individually answer the questions. And then we should pre-aggregate and discuss and cross compare ideas, but I think that makes a ton of sense.
Okay, maybe we can follow up on this offline on the channel and see how we can shape it out. Maybe asking each project to come to this meeting and give a short update, not only technical but also, let me say, community driven. And this could be an idea and also a way to make this meeting more participative. Let's discuss this offline in the channel.
That sounds great. Any other thoughts on Fabrizio's idea? Okay. Are there any other group topics or PSAs anyone would like to make? Otherwise, we will move on to sub-project updates. I will wait an uncomfortably long period of time. All right, then we move on to sub-project updates. We only have 2 sub-projects on here, one of which is in absentia. And so I would normally read that, and I will probably do the other one. I don't know if someone else wants to read Daniel's, but otherwise I can do it. Please feel free while I'm reading out this one and talking about KOps to add your own or sub-projects that you represent. So Daniel in absentia reports on etcd ADM. There is a new release coming. I'm not sure exactly what features are in that, but there is a relevant thing coming on the KOps side, which I'll talk about in a minute. And there's also lots of active work on the etcd bootstrap provider for CAPI. So figuring out how etcd ADM and CAPI can work well together, particularly for the case of what kubeadm has historically called, I believe, an external etcd cluster. And so there is a proposal hackmd link there in the agenda, which I will not try to pronounce. And please feel free to read and comment on that. I think there is a plan for a meeting sometime. I'm not sure exactly when, but otherwise it is being discussed in the CAPI and or etcd ADM meetings.
There's a discussion later today at 11 Pacific.
That's wonderful. So hopefully some people will join at that time. The next update is, I guess, from myself, which is on KOps. We are working on the 122 release of KOps to support Kubernetes 122. And the, I guess, more interesting cross-product news or cross-project news is that we have effectively moved etcd manager to the etcd ADM repo. And we are working on actually consuming the artifacts that are built from the etcd ADM repo in KOps. That will hopefully land this week. And those artifacts are built using the staging and promotion process that lands them on kates.gcr.io. So I think that's a good example of moving projects to the official release staging and release pipelines. All right. If there are no questions on either etcd ADM or KOps, then I will move on to Fabrizio. Would you like to give us an update on kubeadm?
Sure. In kubeadmin, we are mostly focused on basically getting the v1 beta 3 API. So the work is already started. The old API v1 beta 1 was removed. v1 beta 3 is added, and now there is a the first batch of PR, which are basically changing, adding incremental changes on V1 beta 3 that initially was cloned by V1 beta 2. So the first set of change was is about removing deprecated info, and then we will start adding new things as defined. And that's pretty all for Kubernetes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Fabrizio. Any comments or questions on that? Otherwise, I think Fabrizio goes to the next topic, which is Cappy.
Okay, so some updates with regards to cluster PI. First of all, the proposal time, the proposal window for V1 Alpha 4 is basically closed. However, we're still working on two proposals. One is Kubernetes node authentication that basically will allow node to join in a more secure way. And we are still working. This proposal is still targeted for V1 Alpha 4, but basically it is a no-breaking change, so it is not touching the API, so it is fine to basically, we agreed on extending a little bit the deadline for this proposal. And then there is also interesting discussion going on about the idea of cluster class and managed cluster. So there are discussion thread in the cluster API channel, and there is a proposal being finalized by Gab from VMware, so one of my colleagues, and Vince. And yeah, this is a really interesting topic that will improve the user experience. We are targeting initially the most common use case, so we want to make it really easy and simple to manage let me say, a standard cluster. And what feelings into standard cluster is still yet to be defined, but is really this interesting discussion. Moving on, this week I also pick up some work that was originally started by Ben Moss, and basically I've sent a PR that introducing in CAPD a new kind of machine that basically is backed by Kubernetes. And this is interesting because as soon as we get stable and completed, it will be possible. Basically, it will be much easier to stress all the CAPI machinery by getting bigger cluster in end-to-end test. The caveat is that this machine backed by Kubernetes cannot host workloads, but it is fine. It is not relevant for the testing cluster API machine, most of the cluster API machine. So this is an interesting idea. If you want feedback, are welcome. The PR is there, is not big, so this is interesting. And the last topic is that in cluster API, we have a set of issues with regarding the possibility to have to expose component config from the cluster API. This is an interesting topic, and also it has a lot of interdependence with the component config working group, which is now kind of blocked. And so there are some discussions starting around how and what we can do for reviving component config. So the component config working group or for addressing the problem of the current implementation. So if someone is interested to this topic, which impacts not only CAPI, but also Kubernetes and probably other installers, please reach out to me. I'm really curious to know what are people's opinions with regard to component config in its current state, and also its possible roadmap, because this is not an easy take to work on component config, and we need a critical mass to get this moving. So if someone is interested, please reach out.
Thank you, Fabrizio. Those are actually really exciting things, all of them happening. I have a question personally on the component config, which is we have a similar thing in KOps. We feel like we should adopt component config, but as far as I know, the versions aren't necessarily stable. Is that true? Or have they locked the APIs at this point?
Yeah, the fact is that the component config maturity across the board is not consistent. And the most advanced one is Kubernetes, which is V1 beta something. And in Kubernetes, they also issued a deprecation notice on flags. But in my opinion, it is too early. My personal opinion on the topic, it is too early, because there are still some problems to be addressed in the overall machinery. Let me make an example. There is no a clear way or an automatic way to allow users to upgrade their own component config, or it is not easy for the tool like Kubernetes or KOps to build an automatic upgrade procedure. And there is a lot of component-specific knowledge to do this. So we want to avoid to spread this knowledge around all the installer. We want to get this in a single point. This is one problem. Another problem, which is stuck in the design phase, is the having instance-specific component config, and how basically you can split global cluster settings from the local settings, get them merged. So there is still a lot of problem, or a lot of possible improvement in the idea, and this makes really difficult for tool like Cluster API and I guess also COPS to chart a path forward in the adoption of Cluster API or of component config. That means that, in my opinion, we have to sit down and agree on what will come next, and then try to make this happen.
Yes, I agree with that. I mean, I think if we can get them to commit to not changing too many of the fields in just, for example, the kubelet config, which sounds like they've implicitly committed to with the beta one, then we can start adopting it, and we can, as far as I know, we can use flags and component config, and maybe we have to all write the same upgrade logic 3 times or n times, and that's the way it is for now. But I feel like if the thing which was, in my opinion, a blocker before was the idea that the schema could change, and if that's locked at this point, and they're sort of happy with it being the way it is, then I think that will be, we should certainly cooperate and like trade notes, but maybe we can all do kubelet config and see what commonalities and what problems arise. That might be a way to move forwards, because I feel like there's been this chicken and egg, right? Component config hasn't been adopted, so they can't say it's ready, and then we can't adopt it because it isn't stable type thing. So
yeah, I agree. This may, in my opinion, as a SIG, we were co-sponsor of this group, which that now is kind of stopped. And so as a SIG, in my opinion, we have to ask ourselves what is a viable path for this topic.
I think if I recall correctly, there is some flag that is only available in component config. I actually don't think it was kubelet. I think it was something else, but hopefully it was kubelet. So I think we're being forced to adopt component config in any case, or will be forced to adopt it. So there is that path to getting adoption.
Yeah, the problem is that this is happening somehow without control. So we are kind of following instead of driving, which is not ideal.
I think it's interesting how with the cluster class problem as well of managed clusters, we use a combination of COPS created clusters and EKS CTL created clusters, and whether managed providers will ever expose component config to you. There is kubelet, you certainly can, because at the end of the day, you're running a node, but for control plane components, I know that providers are quite touchy on what they expose to you. But maybe component config is a way to say, hey, sorry, that's the contract, and you have to follow it.
I mean, I can certainly, I can't speak for the providers who are here, but I think if they are going to expose a flag, it would be nice if the schema they used was the component config schema, right? So like you should be able to provide a partial component config, and maybe you're not allowed to set certain fields because they are like not supportable in that scenario. But it would be nice if we didn't have a second schema, in my opinion.
The EKS CTL schema is quite easy to find and is remarkably similar to KOPS schema. But
which is good.
That's
good. Okay. I mean, I think the intention with KOPS is that a lot of our we're actually talking about this a lot right now. Like KOPS has this cluster object, which is a large sort of monolithic object which contains, you know, CNI configuration and optional like API server flag overrides and all these things. And what we're talking about now is the whether we can get that into a set of objects that are more modular. So API server and kubelet and scheduler and kube controller manager will move to component config, and the CNI configurations will ideally move to, you know, operators that control Cilium or Calico or whatever CNI provider you're using, and so on. Rather than, so basically breaking up this monolithic object into separately versioned, ideally separately released, but TBD objects. And those should then be a lot more shareable, because even if GKE says, well, we're not going to let you set API server flags, they might let you set, as you say, kubelet flags or CNI flags or whatever it is.
If I can comment on this, in kubeadmin, we went a little bit further down this path. In one older version of kubeadmin API, we had component config embedded in the API. So we basically were importing types. And this is something that at the end we decided to move away from, because basically it was linking the life cycle of our API to the life cycle of other API which are not yet stable. So this was bad. And then now we have basically component config as a separate object in a multi-part YAML. This is how we manage this in our configuration. But we are still not super happy about this, because at the end, the lack of an upgrade path or the lack of a good, let me say, library we can rely on for doing validation, defaulting, stuff like that, is still putting on kubeadmin and on the kubeadmin maintainer and the end user a lot of work that ideally should be taken care in by the component and offered as a service.
If no one else, actually, that prompts me. One of the things we have in KOPS is we have these, what are effectively add-ons like CNI providers built into KOPS today, and it has similar processes similar problems where we effectively have to maintain that logic and that validation. One of the things that we have teed up for I guess 123 or maybe 122, I can't remember. For the next release is initial support for add-ons that effectively can either run on the cluster or can run, you can sort of run them locally in a sort of generative mode. And so the unit that we have begrudgingly decided to use is a Docker container. But the idea is, in this way, what you could have is you could have validation logic, for example, that runs in a Docker container, or so there would be a well-known image that could Micah asks Docker or OCI container. I don't know. We do Docker run.
Is it tied to the Docker implementation of containers, or is it just a container that can be run somewhere in a runtime like Containerd?
It is a container that can be run somewhere. The current implementation only shells out to Docker using exec. But yes, the intent is that it will be much more generic in future, but we're starting with the MVP, as it were. But if we can, maybe we can figure out a way to package validation or defaulting or things like that in containers that we can effectively dry run, and add-ons in the same way, where we run an add-on and we pipe. So the way we're doing it right now is, what's interesting is some add-ons have dependencies on other things, and we pipe in the universe into the add-on in a dry run mode. And then there's some fancy code that like mocks out client Go. Yes, well, the client. So it's able to see the kubedns cluster IP address as if it was actually running on the cluster. So it's sort of sneaky in that way. But the point being, I think the real point is, like, maybe we can, I don't think anyone loves the idea of Docker run or Containerd run and taking that dependency, but maybe it's the best we've come up with so far. And maybe we can package that logic in Docker or OCI containers, I will say, to avoid getting called on it again.
Yeah, I certainly remember the add-on problem from COPS.
Yes,
It's a hard problem to solve.
We've almost got it. I think we have it teed up, and that will also, like, that's another reason to split it out into unrelated objects, because if we have to resynchronize them all into the cluster object, there's no real point. So there must be a set of additional objects.
Sorry, Justin, for my understanding, what we're discussing is for add-ons, and you are planning to do something similar for component config as well.
We don't have plans for component config, but I'm wondering if it could be applied to component config for the same problem. That it is the same problem, right? There is a different group from us that is not the KOps team that is, in theory, maintaining this configuration and this type, and we would like to not re-implement all the work they do, and they best know how to implement validation, and we would like for that validation to be consistent across KOps and kubeadm and Cluster API and kubefray and everything, right? It's the same problem as the add-on problem. Maybe.
I'm definitely interested in this. If there is some documentation or you can give some pointer, I'm happy to look at it.
Also, I will put a link into our agenda for the sort of work in progress PR that is implementing the core DNS operator sort of client side, which includes piping in the kubedns service. So there's some sort of non-trivial back and forth into the container, but I will put a link to that right now. Let me put a link in, and then I will core DNS add-on work in progress PR. We have also reached the end of our agenda. I don't know if there's other things, other subproject updates that want to, because I realize we've been talking about that topic for a long time. If there are not, we are welcome to continue talking about it. Was someone talking or was that background noise? I'm sorry.
Sorry, it might be background noise. I have a question. As I've alluded to, we use COPS and EKS CTL at the moment. I don't like EKS CTL, I'm not gonna lie, but I also don't like having to pay for my control plane. So it kind of balances itself out. But I really like the idea of cluster API. So I guess as an end user and a part-time contributor to COPS when I used it every day, not so much now. Sorry, Justin. Is there anything that people like me that run lots of clusters could do to help with cluster API? Is there something stopping the V1? Because I remember being excited about this in 2018, and it's a very, very hard problem. So it's not a dig, but it's like, what can I do to help?
I can try to give an answer. First of all, any feedback is valuable. So if you find something that is hacky or missing or you don't like in the API, is valuable feedback. Even idea as a valuable feedback. So this is they are really feedback from the field are always valuable, and then they get taken into consideration. With regards to moving to graduating the API, I think that this was a topic that we discussed several times. So from one side, as a project, I think that we can say without doubt that we are already acting as a GA API, because we provide conversion, we backward fix. So we are, for sure, we are not acting like a alpha project. We have end-to-end test coverage, which is continually growing. So we are already acting as GA. We have products built on top of Cluster API, and so every time we do a release, we get a nicely round of feedback pretty soon. So also the feedback from the community is really helping in keeping up with the quality of the code. Why we are not graduating? I think that we would like to do so. We are a little bit worried by the fact that being a more, let me say, stable API will slow down us in addressing new requirements, because there are a lot of new requirements. If you think to manage a class, if you think to load balancer and stuff like that. So we would like to get them in before moving to something more stable. But that means that, at least as my take on the problem, is that probably we will move as soon as possible. We will move to beta, and the requirement to move to beta is to have the load balancer proposal in, which is a big change for the API. And this will be, let me say, a good middle ground from being GA and being fast, still evolving as a project. But definitely, I'm happy to discuss why not we go to V1 alpha, to V1 API. What is missing to get there? This would be interesting discussion.
I think, thank you for the update. I think even beta is enough to convince my team to start using it, and even if it's non-production clusters that we use it for, it's just to try and give some feedback on it, because yeah, it's an awesome project, which, you know, and seeing all the combination of all of the other lifecycle projects into Cluster API is amazing as well.
Yeah, I think that beta will happen soon. We were planning to do this before KubeCon US, but then basically a person who was working on the load balancer proposal got more internal stuff, so more internal work, so he had to step down for the proposal, and we were really near the deadline for V1 Alpha 4. And so the decision was, okay, he can't make V1 Alpha 4. We don't want to make such a big change in V1 Beta 1. And that doesn't mean that probably we need a last alpha release to get the load balancing proposal settled and stable. And then we move to V1 Beta 1. But yeah, this is being discussed. Also, let me say, having more API release during the year is something that we are discussing to get there soon. But yeah, if you can show up at the meeting and provide this feedback, this is valuable. This will push us and try to address the problem. So.
And then I guess that the second stage is then each provider becoming stable. And I guess that's one for a sub-project. So I don't know if there's a provider, a cluster API provider for COPS planned.
There is. That is another one we're trying to do at the same time as add-ons. We are going to hopefully start. We have the code. There's another PR that's just been sitting there for a comparable amount of time, like I think 2 years. But it's been updated and it works, where we are able to back an instance group with a cluster API machine deployment. So we're going to start with not trying to replace the control plane, but just being able to do the worker nodes, as it were. That's a good start. We obviously want to go further, but yeah, that it is very much part of the plan, and hopefully we will get there this year.
Well, thanks very much. I'll try and convince my team to spin up a cluster with Cluster API and see what falls off.
And Fabrizio, is it fair to say AWS is the best supported one right now?
It is hard to say. We are still considering Kappa, let me say, the reference implementation, because usually things happen first in Kappa and then in the other provider. But definitely we have a good maturity in Kappa V, in Azure. And also I see other providers following up pretty quickly, like MetalCube and OpenShift, the Capo provider, and I see also a good activity on the Equinox Tinkerbell side recently. So yeah, Kappa is kind of still the reference, but the other are following really tight.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I was just trying to, like, when someone is going to try it, which they should probably try it out on the best one, and yeah, it sounds like they're all pretty good now, other than the one which I should yes, which you're going to shame me on, but yes.
If I can take the opportunity to make a call for action, is what I really would like to get up to speed is Kappa G, so the provider for Google, for many reasons. And the main reason for that is that whenever we can get Kappa G up to speed and fix some flakes that we have currently, it will be possible to hook Cluster API into the Kubernetes test grid, and this will be beneficial for us as Cluster API project because we get all the feedback from the entire Kubernetes community, and also for the Kubernetes community itself, because we are basically dropping the collection of bash script that exists in a / cluster and moving to something which is better maintained. So help wanted on Kappa G.
Yes. Yes. I'll see what I can do. I don't know if there are other topics otherwise, or sub-project updates. Otherwise, people can have a bit of time back. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you for a wonderful discussion. And see everybody in 2 weeks.
Bye.